Good morning. This is Pops hanging out. Yeah, it's raining outside, so there isn't much I want to do outside, but I'll get out to the shop shortly. What time is it? Oh, past time for the ibuprofen. No, I haven't been on here recently because I really didn't have anything to talk about, teach, or ideas to toss around. What I'd like to talk about today is about teardown preparations in conjunction with forensic studies. This is after you've done your troubleshooting. Okay, key point. Excuse me. And there's other considerations as well, but these are some of the things that we're going to run into. Now, before we get there, I just want to talk about a first thought. When you're tearing an engine down, a transmission, rear end, or anything, chainsaw, a lot of little pieces there. And in one case, I was tearing down a extruder. Yeah, it was a plastic extruder that oozed plastic or bituminous plastic or something out to seal membranes in fracking ponds. Fresh water, calm down, and you have to lay the parts out and over there, and sometimes you need to have the containers available to put separate parts in. You're going to have a problem with bosses on two fronts. One, Cummins Engine Company came up with one of the worst things that they've ever done. And it was during their worst warranty period that I've seen with the ISX signature engine and the ISM engine. When they brought those out and started putting those in over-the-road trucks where they're varying RPM all day long, it wasn't like they were in a loader going right at it and under a full 50+% to 100% load all the time. The varying on and off RPM and load, engines blew up a lot. And Cummins said you had to have an answer in 15 minutes for what the problem was. Well, when it blew up, they wanted to know what it was. Was it the chicken or the egg? You know, the pistons in a couple of pieces. Why? They wanted to know why. Well, there were several different things that could cause the problem, so you had to forensically go through and study. They wanted an answer in 15 minutes. Didn't matter what it was. So the bosses used to come out and ask me this one, what did you find? I said, nothing. What do you mean nothing? You got to have an answer, for why it happened. I said, sure. I know why it happened. All right, then. So you know how to fix it? No. And over there is the, what do you call him there? Shop foreman. Harry starts laughing. I said, Kim, you're out of your league. And Kim looks at me and says, well, wait a minute. You got to have an answer for me. And I said, yeah, I do. I know what the problem is. Okay. I got to find the cause. What? The cause. We know what the complaint was. We confirmed the complaint. This is part of troubleshooting. This is where a lot of the guys use the 3 and 4 C's anymore. The complaint, the cause, and the correction. And then Dave's Automotive adds the fourth one, confirm the repair from the correction. A simplified view, and it's a good one to keep anyway, and especially in the cell phone generation. But we used to have one where the customer would call and you'd get the complaint, but that isn't the actual deal. You have to confirm the complaint, because out here in the equipment and the farm tractor world, the complaint may not even be the actual operator's complaint, may not be what was sent to you over the phone. Or to go look at it. There may be somebody else there. You actually have to confirm the complaint verbally, and then step 2, confirm it yourself if you can. If you can operate the machine or visibly watch it. So we're operating from that standpoint where this is all done down to this point where you're starting to think of what the problem might be. Well, you've already gotten to this point, and now you're into the forensics. You got to start tearing into it, doing your testings and your adjusting. Well, you got to the point where you got to fix this thing, okay? So you've gone through your complaint and cause, and you're listing your correction on the simplified view. So while you're there, you're going through the teardown. You know what you have to do. You know what the correction is. Engine overhaul, valve job, whatever it might be. So when you start your teardown, I'm going to give you an idea of what to do in your shop. That's right, in the shop. You're in the bay, if you have a bay. What's the first thing you're going to do? Sweep the floor and clear it before you ever bring it in. Wait a minute, I just swept it. Go over it again. Well, yeah, but make sure there's nothing else of some chucklehead pitched across the floor and left in your bay. 2 reasons. One of them, the accidental piece that goes flying, and the other one is, like I used to have back in the 80s, there was this stupid little jackass that would throw stuff in there hoping to toss and get me off base. Because he was, how can you say it? He was fumble fodder. He wasn't fumble, he was fumble fodder. He ended up in jail a while later from buying stolen property that he knew was stolen. He was drunk enough to admit it. And that's happened more often than you would ever believe. There's a truck shop down the road here, Lapke's truck shop. They used to actually sabotage people's trucks just so that they, on another shift, would look better. They'd actually go out and, so that's why I say sweep the floor, clean up your desk, your work table, and you're not done yet. Now you're going to get a cart. Ooh, yeah. And if you have just a big, huge toolbox with a open cubby or whatever, that's a nice start because you can keep your tools in there. But usually that thing's pretty cumbersome. So you're going to have a parts cart and a tool cart. Trust me. Listen to me again. Trust me on this one. And then you're going to have a layout table, hopefully double-decker. Well, some of you may have a cart. Lay it out. Now, this may sound strange and weird, but you need to put rags, because if there's some round objects on there, you want them to impress into the paper rags. Even the cloth rags will work, but you want to lay this stuff out. Why? Pretend an engine teardown. It's the easiest one to go by. You're tearing your valve covers off. If you're working on a car or truck, most often it's a V8. And so you want to be able to put your valve covers on one side or the other, or one level or the other. Label it, left and right. That's right, left and right bank. And as you tear it apart, take each individual piece. If it's a complete rocker shaft, then take it off and put the bolts back in the same holes. Take it off as complete as possible and lay it over in the valve cover. Use that as something to hold the parts in. Push rods. When you bring them out, you want a nice table or something to roll each and every push rod on and lay it out in place. You say, listen carefully. Because I just ran into this recently. And I had looked at the parts, but I hadn't turned them over. And what we had here was, you lay everything out, your push rods and your rockers, and everything's in place as you're tearing the engine down. You know where it came from. Okay? Now you're going through your block and doing the inspection before you even got the block. You've got the valve cover off, rockers off, push rods out. And this could be a diesel engine, 6-cylinder. You just need a longer table, longer space, and you're going to lay them out by the cylinder and by exhaust intake, all the way down the line. Yeah, every push rod, every lifter, match them up with each one. You say, this is insane. The only time it's not insane is when you're getting another engine and this is a core, and you're not tearing it down. If you're actually doing the overhaul, you have to follow this procedure. Really. You don't absolutely need to, but if you want to be an actual technician, not just a mechanic or a fixer, you need to take your time. So if you're doing a 6-cylinder, eventually you're going to have the pan off in there, and you're going to pull the cam out and everything else, and you're going to lay them next to each other on the table. Push rods, lobes, lifters, all in line with each other as much as humanly possible. You haven't even started to look at the parts yet. You just saw what you could see as you were tearing things apart. When you get your black strip down, because we're going to do the full Monty here, correct? You're not just leaving it in, even if you leave it in the chassis, but let's play it like we're tearing it out. So you got the engine maybe on a stand or on blocks, and you're gutting the top end, and your head's off. As close as you can, keep the head near everything else. But if you have to, cardboard on the floor right next to your cart, or a table, or whatever your other parts are laid out on. Same order. Yes. Don't change a thing. Don't touch a thing yet. You got the head off. Now you're eyeballing your sleeves and everything else that's going on. Your injectors hopefully have been out by now, unless it's a gas engine. Now, who cares? You're going to throw the spark plugs away. Even the injectors, you're going to do something with them anyway, but you can't damage them for a forensic inspection. Spark plugs also. If you go to Steve Morris Engines, he'll talk to you about spark plugs, and he'll say, yeah, but he's talking about it both in the gas and the alcohol world. There are certain signs and symptoms that you can see. Forensics, we're still working on that. The tip of your injector can tell the story too, as well as above the copper seal, or if it's not a copper seal, it's a brass plug or stainless plug down inside the head, your injector cup. And from there up, how much discoloration is there and how far. You're going to do all these studies as you're tearing it apart. Why? Because you pulled your injectors out, taking the head off. And they're laid out on the table in between all your valve stuff, isn't it? So on the V8, you've got it all apart, and hopefully you have two tables, left and right, or large enough, top and bottom, labeled left and right, hopefully, or right and left, depending on which way you want to read. You got everything all laid out. Your block is stripped. It's all lined up. You've got your crankshaft sitting next to the block someplace. And that part, that's where it starts to valve training head over here. And if you have the second cart, over here is your crankshaft, camshaft, main bearing caps laid all out next to each other all the way down through. And as you take all that stuff out, you're just doing a quick eyeball and laying it down in order. Just getting the engine apart and in order. Okay, it's gutted. You got your injection pump. If it's I'm going to go with diesel. But your injection pump goes out almost 100% of the time, unless you just put that thing on within the last couple of weeks. Injection pump, gone. Injectors, they're gone. Injection pump, you're not going to be able to do much with. If it's a common rail, you already know whether the pump is good or not, for the most part, because you've done a fuel system diagnosis with the engine running poorly. So you have an idea whether the high pressure pump's worth it or not. But to be honest, especially if it's a complete engine overhaul, if you do not replace your injectors and your fuel system sensors, you're insane. Let me repeat. If you do not replace your injectors and your fuel system sensors and look into your high pressure pump and its condition, most likely replace it, you are insane. Why do I say that? For the main reason that if there is a faulty injector, you will spray outside of the piston bowl where the action's supposed to be happening. And if you start spraying either because timing's off, which is electronic in your sensors, or because the hole in the injector is off and not spraying, it's spitting, or it's spraying at the wrong angle because of damage or garbage built up in there, you will wash the cylinder walls down and kill your engine. Just that simple. Well, wait a minute. If you got enough space, it's not going to bother it that much. And if you got enough, it's just plain wore out. Yeah, I've seen it where it's washed down once, completely washed the cylinder down. Well, everything's shot anyway by the time it got there. So let's stop with that. It has to be new. And some of you are going to say you got to replace a fuel rail, and some companies will demand that. It starts getting expensive. It's already expensive. Now you're really into it. But still, to keep your engine running right. Unless you just put a new set of injectors in the last week or two, down the road. There are certain engines that John Deere has built, like their 12.5s and their 13.5s, that it doesn't matter if you're having engine trouble and you pull that injector out, it is now junk. And on the 12.5, I have heard, I did read it myself once actually. I sent the information to another dealer that was not a John Deere dealer. And the injector cups are to be replaced every single time an injector is replaced. They put a 2 or 3 week old set of injectors in because there was a bad cup. They hadn't replaced the cup. They put the head back on with a new injector in there, and it destroyed the new injector, ruined the cup. And if I remember the guy telling me correctly, they thought they almost had to replace the head. Want to argue all of that, the replacement? But this is also your forensics. Your fuel system, your injectors, the head, laying everything out, down cylinder by cylinder. As you tear it apart, you note things. And then when you start going through the parts one by one, are the push rods bent? Is there a rocker arm that looks funky or is loose? You're going to go through each step of this. Are the lifters okay? How does the cam look compared to the lifters? And you're starting top, going all the way down through to the cam, looking into the bores, into the block to be sure they're all okay. Because you can get something with a bad bearing, and the cam itself was okay, but the bearing got antifreeze or or antifreeze in the oil, or even too much fuel in the oil, because they didn't change it as often as they should, and it'll wipe that surface right out. But the cam doesn't necessarily go bad immediately. So you may have one where you've got to do a lot of measuring all the way down through this, but it'll tell you what you need to measure in the first place. And if you see one push rod and lifter and cam lobe, etc., is in good shape, then you're going to make those measurements there and compare them all the way down through. And then you're going to compare it to what the spec is. You'll have something to compare. But look at it first without going into the spec book. Pistons, what's your piston clearance, etc., etc. And you say, well, I'm just going to put a kit in it anyway. True, but you want to have something to go on. Most of the time you're overhauling a diesel, there's not much of a ring ridge, if any at all. So what you're looking for is a comparison of what it was compared to what it is. And Allis-Chalmers engines that would have 7,000 or 8,000 piston clearance, the new kit would come through at 4.5. But there was a bulletin that everybody missed that didn't get sent out to all, that there had to be different bearings in the engine that opened up a hole to spray oil on the backside of that piston so it could survive at 4.5 or 5,000 piston clearance. Aftermarket company Clevite back then, that was still in business, all their pistons came through between 6,000 and 7,000 clearance, and they had almost no problem all the way up through the line. You could run the 4.5 or 5,000 on a naturally aspirated 180, maybe a 185, but anything with a turbo, So you needed to know that stuff, and you study it to find out what you're looking for. You got a bad piston that's scuffed on the bottom of the skirt? Well, now you're starting to know you have to check the rods. You can't just do a quick little in-house measurement and look over. They've got to be sent out unless you have a rod machine there. Wrist pins have to be done, etc., etc. You know that. Look, you're looking at the wear inside the cylinders one at a time. And with the rods lined up, you'll know which rods in specific could be the problem. Mark them. Put a question mark on them. So the guy that's doing the work on the rod looks at it and says, I wonder why that's there. And you get a phone call and say, well, we suspect there's something wrong with the rod. Just wanted you to take that as a note. Oh, cool. Because some places can bore you a nice wrist pin bushing hole. And because of the old engines with lower compression, the actual piston height doesn't have to be perfect. You can be off 5 or 10 thousandths and it'll never bother a thing, except unless it's cocked. So the actual height of the piston isn't going to make any difference, especially when they're power cell engines. However, that rod, like I found in one engine, naturally aspirated 180 or 185, they had used ether to start it because it was so worn out, and there were 4 rods, and the piston showed wear between the piston head and the bottom of the skirt and the sleeve. You could see the marks. I sent it out, and the guy said, yep, there's a problem. And he had to either hand straighten them or send them out to somebody that has an alignment jig, where they put the bushing in, and if it's only off 5 thousandths plus or minus a little, they can bore the hole in the rod without trying to bend it and have it be perfect center to center and a line between the 2 pins. Your forensic study will help them out. They should know better. They should, but come on. This is your job to start it up front. When they come back, you're going to try and note as many things that have been changed as well. Okay, so you've gone through that, you've done your forensic study, but the main thing here is that you've laid out. If you're V8s or such, you want 2 carts, plus a tool cart, and your tool cabinet. You're not going to be rolling around unless you're in the automotive shop going from bay to bay, but even there they usually have their own bay. So you want 1 or 2 benches and 1 or 2 carts. The cart for the tools that are specific to this job that you're going to take back and put in your big fat monster, $30,000 tool cabinet. So those are the things that I want to talk about today, that when you're setting up. First off, clean your whole floor out. Make sure there's nothing there. Okay? Number 2, bring your trays and at least 1 table. If only 1 tray is available, then bring 2 tables. One way or another, you need to, and get a barrel. Make sure the holes it's either upside down or the holes are plugged. Put a piece of board on top. If you can, put a couple screws in it so the thing doesn't go flipping. I've seen that. Had a guy do that to me once. Yeah, make sure it's secure. Just get anything you can to lay all your parts out, okay? And make sure that they start, even on a cardboard or table or whatever you're laying the parts on, make sure you have it labeled, number 1, especially on a V8. which bank, left, right, and even left one, right one, or if it's left one, right two, or in Ford's case, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sure it's labeled so you know what you're studying. Then on the block, same thing. You're going to go through all of your forensics there. And you're going to have this stuff. Before you get it cleaned, you do your study. Begin it. And then as you clean it, bring it back and study it again before you make any final decisions. Have everything checked before you clean it and recheck it after you clean it. And in between, your boss is going to go wild. Yeah, sure, boss. I looked it over. This is the stuff I found so far. If you, what do you mean so far? Well, just that. I pull it apart. I found this stuff. But when I clean it and finish disassembly of the smaller parts, there may be more. I don't want to hear that. You want me to lie to you? No! Well, then let me finish my job, please. You don't have to get tremendously cantankerous. The boss is already mad at you. So don't finish the conversation. Don't just stand back. Yes, sir. No. Talk to him and just tell him, hey, look, boss, your name, my name is on this as well as your name. We both need this right. You want to make a good quote? I need to give you good information. This is what it's going to take. I had two jobs here recently that I caught on. There was nothing major. It was something to correct. We were taking things apart and eyeballing, and everything looked good. When I got back here to the shop to clean some of the parts, I found a push rod that had a scuff mark on the side, meaning it had been kicked off before. And it was not bent by much. But I had to put it on the table and roll it to find it. But in my case, because I tore it apart there and brought it back here, the order of things got out of shape. And I didn't have any place to lay my parts out there. That's why I'm on here talking to you. One of the things I regret and lament is that I didn't have place in the vehicle, but taking folding tables and having barrels handy, even 5-gallon buckets. That's one of the things I used to have. There was a board that I put on top of 5-gallon buckets years ago and lay some of my parts out there. The only problem there is it's too low, but the lower the better because it's not necessarily a greatly stable thing on dirt floors. Why in the world? If I'm just pulling a cylinder head off, I'm out in the field. Yeah, who cares? Dirt floor, whatever floor, as long as it's nice, firm, and you can stand on it and work. I don't care. I had a jackass send me out to do a partial engine overhaul in the rain on a TD20 International dozer with a VT800 engine. Capiche? So I've got a lot of experience on both ends. Shop I have now, we couldn't afford concrete once we got the building up. And by the time we could have afforded the concrete, everything's in the building. You know what I'm saying? So I'm talking to you about layout of everything that's there. So another one you can do too is your parts are all laid out. You got your tool cart, the tools you need for the teardown, and they're all on the one cart. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have enough money, you'll have a cart you can lock those tools in, and go home. But the cart's going to get changed around quite a bit. Why? Because when you tear it apart and everything's all laid out, you've got all your air tools and battery tools and everything all set, to buzz the thing apart. Well, now you're getting into forensic studies and you're being more careful. Now comes out the screwdrivers, the pliers, snap ring pliers, etc., and cleaning tools. And if you can, either get yourself a bucket of parts cleaner. Yeah, get a bucket or pan of parts cleaner. And or bring over an entire parts if they got it on wheels, which I used to have in one shop. And I have it in my shop now as a small little parts good breakfast. Small little parts cleaner on a rolling cart. I wish it was bigger, but it's working out pretty good. I can take it wherever I'm working on one, and my shop isn't that big. It's 24 by 24, and my work area is probably 10 by 15. Capiche? You know what I'm saying? So I got an idea that rolling stuff around, even in a small shop, when you can put it in a position where you want it, very nice. Doesn't have to not have a parts washing pump or any of that. However, make sure you're working in a basket. Okay? Yes. Basket suspended off the floor where all the dirt is. Unless it's a completely fresh fill. But it's helpful. So now you're cleaning off, you're tearing things apart, you're making not just a mental note, you're making a paper note of what you're going to need. You're writing down your parts list that you know. And your boss is going to modify it. There's nothing much you're going to do about that. Almost every boss modifies it. If you have a good boss, he's going to add to it. There's too many question marks for this, too many question marks for that. When you're done, because of your forensic study, if you found enough stuff, it may actually come back to say there's too much machine work, there's too many individual parts that are a problem. We have to replace these sensors no matter which engine it is, so that's a moot point, but you've discussed that, what you do and don't have to replace, that you may call for a complete engine, long block, short block, or whatever is available. True story. And your study will help make that decision. Once you've torn it down and all of a sudden, we tore it all the way apart, now we got to put it back together for a core because we found... Yeah, and then just smile and start laughing when boss says, what are you laughing about? Boss, you could be angry about it, but if we didn't tear it down and study it, we wouldn't know that, would we? No. And you wouldn't have been able to make the comparison. Simple as that. You say, well, we can study it. There are times that you can do your troubleshooting before you do the repair, and you already know there's probably a cracked head. There could be a pinhole in the sleeve. You can see those signs and symptoms of that. And if you got a boss that's willing to go along with it, or a customer, like I had a customer one time, he looked at me and said, why don't we just put another engine in? He says, I get terms and a warranty, and an extended warranty. We all stood there looking at each other. Cool. And all I had done was pulled off the heads and took a look and found one teeny tiny little compression leak. Machine had enough hours on it that it all added up to the decision. Threw the engine together and swapped over the parts when the new engine came in, the reman, and put her back in. But tearing it down to find the problem, comparing the different things that have to be replaced, starting to list the parts, the customer walked in, and he's the one that said, if I'm going to spend the money, I want it right. I want a reman engine. Just that simple. But also while you're doing your forensics, you're noting your radiators. And in this case, noting the fuel tank. We had a $60,000 engine job at a local Anderson equipment shop down here where we fought like mad to get the fuel tank pulled out, the radiator completely redone and recored, and we could not get it done. It went back in less than 20 minutes, almost overheated in 30-degree overnight weather. And they ended up putting in a 1.5 set of injectors and a high-pressure common rail pump because the fuel tank had a 6-inch long hole in it, crack. We knew it did, but it was covered in dirt. And they didn't want to monkey with it. Just push it out and get it out of the way. Okay. Leave the tank there. We were told and ordered. However, because we did the forensic study, 2 of us were able to turn around, and while they were screaming at us, look them square in the face and say, the list was there and you ignored it. And what had happened was, the manager in our case, they couldn't keep a service manager local there. Still can't, that I know of. Well, they've turned another one over, let's put it that way. He lasted 3 or 4 years. Then the 2 good ones before only lasted 1.5 years or 2 years because within 6 months, they knew more than their boss that had been with Komatsu 20 years. And each and every case, because we did the forensic study and wrote down our list, what we knew was wrong. I mean, without a doubt we knew was wrong. You didn't know that crack was in the tank. No, we didn't know it was a crack. We knew there was a massive leak. You didn't know that. What do you mean? We had to replace the primary filter 4 times full of water. Full! Well, that's what it's for. No, not to be full. It was so full it was transferring water through the system because they kept putting in, that's right, water treatment. When you put water treatment in, change the surface tension of the water, its properties, water will go through a water filter. And there was so much water that went through the system that one of the guys was deciding that manager was so mad at me, they had a guy pull an injector apart and found rust in there. And because of the rust, we didn't get warranty. As far as I know. So your forensic study and your list is important. Not even a parts list, a list of what you found. All right, then you find that out with the tools laid out, because you may find that there's a sleeve problem, because you saw a piston problem, because you saw a rod problem, because you looked through the intake piping and you saw dirt and it was all laid out, and you follow the dirt, shiny spots, dirty spots, scuffed spots, places that look like they've been sandblasted, and you're going through and you're finding out that you go back to the source, because you may be taking a separator, pre-cleaner on the air system. You may find that there's a problem with the air filter housing, all kinds of other aside things that will totally affect your next engine that you're putting in that machine, whether it's overhauled, reman, long block, short block. Okay, hopefully that helps. Yes, and don't forget your fuel system, the lines and hoses and all of that. If there's any rubber line on any machine that's over 5,000 hours, especially 10,000, they must be replaced, especially with the newer biofuels. The rubber hoses and lines have to be replaced. Don't even question, don't even ask a question. Please replace them. So, there's the list there, and something that you could go through and think about. That's 31 minutes out of your life and change to give you some ideas that if you're a young punk just getting into this, might be some pretty important stuff. And hopefully what I've done is just 30 minutes where you can turn this thing on and listen to me blather for 30 minutes about some important stuff that, let me tell you, from my experience, when I laid stuff out and did the forensic study, the engine got the parts and started putting things together, and you already knew that the parts were right, but you're measuring them, putting them back together, and you keep hitting it one after the other. Sleeve stand up, piston clearance, ring end gap, and you start going through all of this. You're looking at the deck of the block, and you know it's in good shape because you've checked it. You go through the stuff. You had the head sent out and done, or you, in my case, I can do probably enough heads here, but still, you send the head out, it comes back, and you know the job was done. You know it needed seats. You know that when you start this thing up, it has the proper compression because the rods are right. The valves are at the right, either recession or projection, so to speak, valve height. You know that. And you know the head hasn't been machined too far. You know how to set the injectors in there, because some injectors come through with shims. They're not just a copper seal gasket. They're shims. You change them. There'll be 3 or 4 sets in there. Then you have to know how far the protrusion of that injection nozzle is. You set it in the right depth, and you put that head on there. You turn that key and it pops off. There is no greater feeling in the world than that it fires up and you watch this ding. And then you got 50 psi oil pressure and you haven't even come off idle, and it's still barking, trying to get fuel through to the last injector. That's when you're sitting there going, yes, I got it. It's worth it. What do you mean? It's just like a touchdown in football, only better. They paid you a lot less. See ya.